We are excited to have Vanessa here. Her work is amazing and we love it. We have combined with the Cayuga Museum of History and Art, as Vanessa said, which is located next door. We're hoping to do more together. And this is a great example of what we can do together. While you're here after her talk, please be sure and look around at this exhibit, at her exhibit, and upstairs. You don't want to miss that exhibit because it is incredibly moving. But again, thank you. And Vanessa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. A couple months before May, when this show was put up, I was talking with Davana, the educational director, and she mentioned that this was this momentous year to celebrate Harriet Tubman's life, and that there would be celebrations all over Auburn, and that the Cayuga Museum and the Schweinfurth were talking about doing a show that would honor her. And that was kind of just said in passing, and I started thinking about it at home. And I thought, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that, and honoring this woman that I have always held in such high esteem. And I started doing some research, because we all think we know Harriet Tubman, but she is so much more than what most of us have been taught in school. It's like this much compared to who this woman was. And I found a quote from an abolitionist in Pennsylvania who supported her work and at one point helped pay for one of her missions, for one of her trips, who said that she was, in paraphrasing him, that he had never known anyone who so listened to the voice of God as truth and allowed that voice to lead her. And that struck me, and I knew that's the title of the show that I want to do. I can't speak for Harriet Tubman. It's always hard to speak for other people. And she has always intimidated me. As a storyteller, I tell very few stories about her because I feel like she's like, well, you didn't tell that one very well, you know. Because I think we've done a bad job of telling her truth. So this was for me, it was a very brave thing to do, to try to speak about spirituality and Harriet Tubman. And that topic caught my heart because she was so spiritual. She did believe in God so much. She supported the AME Zion Church. She built one with Jermaine Logan, Reverend Jermaine Logan in Syracuse, New York. She supported the church here. The AME Zion Church here is Harriet Tubman's church. That's how it's identified, that's how it's known. And she left her estate to the AME Zion Church. In a way, I am a descendant of her as an African American because my life was enriched by what she did to fight against enslavement. I would not be who I am today without Harriet Tubman and other men and women who were brave enough to take on this government and to take on society that believed that we were only 3/5 of a person, that we were commodities to be traded, that we were not even human. And it was people like Harriet Tubman who stood up for their own humanity and made a difference and helped end slavery. So we can talk about the Civil War, we can talk about the Emancipation Proclamation, we can talk about all of that. But it really was the individuals that took this task of ending slavery on hand on a personal level, on a self-sacrificial level, that helped end this horrible industry in America. And so I owe that to Harriet Tubman, and in that way, I am her descendant. I am her descendant in that way. So my show begins with, I kind of look at it as wrapping around in here and then traveling across the street and continuing his story. It begins with two pieces that honor my grandmother, my DNA grandmothers. And one figure is to honor my grandmother on my mother's side and to honor my grandmother on my father's side. I was at the Cincinnati Museum, the National Underground Railroad Museum, for a conference. And there was a long table laid out in the lobby. And it said, Howard University Genealogy Study. And that anyone that came into the museum that day could get their DNA swiped. And 6 months later, you would get a picture of who you were. Because we are related to thousands of people, even in 1 or 2 generations back. But you would get this little slice of knowledge. And I ran over to the table, literally ran over to the table, because growing up and the drama of being a tween and a teenager, you know, we feel everything. We feel it really hard. I wanted to know all of who I was. And this denial of that self-knowledge because of slavery, breaking us up, taking Africa away from us, taking culture away from us, sat heavy on my heart always. It was always that little piece over here, you know, on the side, that I lamented. So when I saw that table and free too, I ran over to it. I got swapped. And 6 months came by, I didn't get anything. 7 months, 8 months, finally like 9 months later, I get this envelope in the mail. And my hands are just shaking. And I call my mother, because this is your mitochondrial DNA. It's your mother's back in time. And I call her, I said, Mom, and you know moms, what's wrong? And I said, nothing's wrong. I had my DNA swabbed 9 months ago. She says, I've always wanted to do that. I said, I just got the results. I'm standing here on the porch with the envelope. And she was like, open it, open it. Who are we? And I opened the envelope. There were some interesting things in there that I didn't know. But the big one was that the largest part of my DNA that they tracked was from Sierra Leone, the Mindi people. I said, Mom, we are Mindi. We're from Sierra Leone. And I cannot tell you how much knowing that meant to me and how it meant so much to her. My father had died the month before, and then my mother ended up dying 2 months later. But it was like this knowledge that she had, this gift of knowing, was so important. It was important to me. It was important to my family. Since then, my brother got tested because we got to find out where Dad is from. And so we've done that. So we're getting wonderful things. Ghana, Mali, the Philippines. Oh, that's why Aunt June looked the way she do. Mm-hmm. So I knew that we had white ancestry, Irish. So I knew that. Most of us do. Most of what went on in plantations wasn't pretty stuff. But it was so wonderful to know. And for me, it connected with Harriet Tubman in the family oral history that she was Ghanaian, that her grandmother knew who she was, remembered being kidnapped. At least these are the stories that I've heard. And told her who she was. That it wasn't a mystery of her lineage, of who she was. In Ghana, they have recognized her. I know through work of the family and Michelle Galvin making a trip there. The Ashanti people recognize her as being from their people, of her being Ashanti. And they hold her in esteem also. The first time I went to, so I'm normally in Ghana in the summertime. And I remember the first time I went to Ghana and I stepped off the plane, the first time I went to Africa, and I stepped off the plane. And I touched that ground with my foot, because you don't go, then you didn't go into a little ramp into the airport, but you came down the steps and you touched the ground. I just fell down. And then nobody looked, because it probably happens a lot with African Americans and Jamaicans and all of these people from the diaspora coming to Africa for the first time. That is your first reaction. I'm home. I'm home. The first time as an adult I visited the Harriet Tubman house, I had the same reaction. I fell to the ground. I was waiting to meet with Christine Johnson. So she hadn't come from the back building yet. So I'm on the ground just weeping at Harriet's home. And the enormity of what that word, home, had to mean to her. Someone born not even owning herself. And to finally have a place that is hers, her bed, her house, her kitchen, her floors, her land, her business is there. And then providing a safe haven for the elderly, for family members to live there. There could have not been a more wonderful feeling from the beginnings that she had. Home and what that means. So my feeling in Ghana was the same as I felt at Harriet's house. Home. And to really think about what that means. I think we all take it for granted that you have a place called home, when the enslaved had nowhere called home. It was far away. It was far away in generations. And while I am African American, in the way that I decide my label, I take both parts, African and American. I embrace both sides of the ocean. We went to the slave forts with my kids with Syracuse, Africa bound. I had been there several times with other groups. The first time with a group of women who, after we left the slave fort, we were so quiet in the van, the van driver intuitively knew what he needed to do for us. We were black and white. And he pulled the van over to the beach. And he came out and opened a door. No words were said. We left the slave fort and walked out in different directions in the sand. And I fell to my knees. The slave fort was the hardest place that I have ever been. You can tell stories. You can say what it is. You can philosophize about it. You can illustrate it. But until you go there and go down into those cells and smell the remains of the past, there is no way for me to tell you what those slave forts are like. I think the hardest thing were the rooms, sometimes no wider than this, and long. Locked door, slits across the top every once in a while for air, and up to 200 women piled together, waiting to be taken to places like America. The live and living holding up the dead in the back until they were cleaned out. In the Almena slave fort where our President Obama and his wife visited, stepping out of the door of the women's chamber, there was a stairway up to the captain's quarters. And we were told he would have girls brought out, not women, girls. And he would pick the ones for the night. They would sluice them off with water from the well outside. and take them up to his room. And day after day, year after year, first the Portuguese, and then the British, and then the Portuguese again when Britain ended its trade. 54 slave forts up and down the coast of Ghana kidnapped us from our home and brought us to places like America. I remember thinking about how they talked about how we were packed on ships. I mean, we all see the very traditional layout, head to toe. But when you read the diaries of men who ran those ships and how they put us on our side and packed us in like sardines on our side. How one captain talks about them using a sledgehammer to make us move closer and closer and tighter to each other. When you hear these stories in the place where it happens, when you hear stories of what happened to the Jews at Auschwitz, when you were in the killing fields of Cambodia and hearing the stories, it is so much different than the little bit of information when I was a kid about slavery, 3-4 lines, maybe mentioning Harriet Tubman, them being there and breathing that air. And I remember sitting on the sand, kneeling and sitting and weeping. And my friends, my other 4 friends that I traveled to Ghana with the first time, finding their own places to weep. And these little feet appeared in front of my face. 6 little feet. And so, you know, how you feel shame crying in public, you know. And I looked up, and there were 3 children. 2 of them were twins, a girl and a boy. You could tell looking at them. And another little boy. They were from Elmina, the town right outside the slave fort. And they said to me, "You've been to the slave fort, haven't you?" And I said, "Yes. We know who you are. You come all the time to our town. You're feeling sad, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I am." And the tears started flowing again. And one of the twins, he put his hand on my shoulder and he looked in my eyes. He said, "But you are here. You have come back through the door of no return." 7, 8-year-old. He said, "The only way to live with this history is to forgive and to acknowledge," and he used that word, acknowledge, that there are grandmothers and grandfathers at the bottom of the sea who did not make it to where you are from, but you did. You are here. That was my first visit to Elmina Slave Castle. I think of Harriet Tubman being a descendant of the Ghanaian people of the Ashanti tribe. So I think of that heritage that was passed down to Harriet of self-knowledge and awareness. And one can only imagine how much that played into the amazing work that she did with her life. Not just knowing who she was now, but knowing where she came from, being graced, at least on that plantation, of having her grandmother's presence and her mother's presence to mold her, to teach her. I don't think we often think about what descendancy does for us. That she just didn't come out of the air. That all of that strength and braveness and audacity to take her own freedom came out of a lineage that she was lucky to still have access to on that plantation, when so many of our ancestors were sold off, families broken apart, and forever. And at the point that she decides to take her own freedom is when she is going to be sold away, when she has that knowledge. And she decides at that point, oh, no, no, no. You don't decide. You don't decide. I decide. Self-agency. They were Harriet Tubmans who made a decision to run, found a way to freedom, and returned again and again to get family members and took others with her. That's not a seeker. That's a taker. And so to give people to give them agency. So that my first two pieces really speak that. It's a big story, but it speaks that big story of lineage. And my father was an upholsterer. My mother was a home economic majors from Tuskegee, what's now Tuskegee University. It was Tuskegee Institute when they graduated. So fabric was everywhere in our house. My mother made all of our clothes till I was too stupid in 6th grade to say, I don't want you to make my clothes anymore. I want clothes from Day Brothers. My father would give my mother a break from the kids on Saturday, and he would take us to his upholstery shop. And what I would do is he would be stripping furniture and cutting things out, and there would be scraps everywhere. And my father found out I was doing this. I had a drawer of scraps in the house, in my bedroom. He was like, what do you want that stuff for? I was like, I just like it. I just like the feel of it and the patterns and the textures and stuff. That began my fabric addiction. Hi, my name is Vanessa. It's been 24 hours since I bought fabric. Hi, Vanessa. The fabrics I use are from Ghana, largely from Ghana. When I went there the first time, I lost my mind. I always take a suitcase, the second big suitcase, empty, so I can fill it with stuff. I take it with donations and I empty it. And I went to this market, and for blocks, there were storefronts of fabric. I nearly was catatonic. And so I love African fabrics and the color and the meaning to me. And I look for fabrics that have codes in them to me. The colors mean something to me in the way that I put things together. I love bright colors. And so when I do my work, I do like it raggedy. I mean, I look at other work and I go, look, it's so nicely done. And then I feel insecure. And then I try to sew like that. And it's square. And then I go, and I pull the edges. I just can't do it. So my style is I want things to look like fabric, feel like fabric, to have the feel of fabric. I don't want to make it look like a picture. That's fine for other folks, and I'm not putting it down because I really admire it. Several of the pieces are built there. That I think one that's here and two that's over in Cayuga are built boxes in the shape of houses. And it's, for me, again, that whole question of home. What is home? What does home mean to us? How is it defined? And how did Harriet Tubman define home? Because certainly the plantation was home where she was born. But spiritually, freedom-wise, a plantation was not home. And for her to create this home here, to define it and own it and hold the deed to it, is what home is about, where you choose where you're living, where you're going to be, not somebody else. So home is a continued thing that I examine throughout my life, like where is my home? I spend every summer, except for now during COVID, in Ghana and weighing those two places of America, which I will never let go of. I was born here, this is my country, and damn it, our blood built it. So I'm not dishonoring my ancestors by walking away. Our blood flows all through this land. Every grand building and industry rests on the back of free black labor and children's labor and different immigrant groups, right? We all have a claim in this, so I'm not letting go of America. But then Ghana is also my home. It is the motherland. And so the built boxes, and one of the things I wanted to do in this show was to stretch myself. So I hadn't done a lot with wood, and so I did more with wood. One of the pieces that are over at the Cayuga Museum is like a built shield with a back and forth design of fabric in Chin-Chin, which is an Adinkra symbol from the Ashanti people of Ghana that she is a descendant of. I've created like a warrior shield because Harriet Tubman was a warrior. There's another built piece over there that I was like putting on Facebook. I'm almost finished with the body parts. I got a hand to go. And so it's representative of a slave ship for me. It's boxes put together and with an altar at the top of Harriet Tubman. And all of these body parts, hands, hips, feet. And I wanted this to represent the brokenness that happened to us and removing us piece by piece from Africa. It would be like to say this room is a nation, a neighborhood. And now all of you are going to be disappeared. And only you guys are left to build a nation with, to continue a heritage with. That is what happened during the African slave trade. There's so many of us, they're saying up to 17 million, 14 to 17 million of us were kidnapped. The best, the strongest. And then those, like the little boy said, that are lying at the bottom of the sea that didn't make it here with us. So I think of Harriet Tubman with at the top there is I wanted to extend the idea of spirituality and religion with her, so you'll see symbols from other religions. So this one has a piece from Voodoo and a shoe piece, which is the god of travel, of displacement, of travel. You know, and one of the habits is like when you're going on the road, if you are part of that belief system, you throw a little candy out your window of your car to kind of appease him and make sure you have a good journey. So I think of her on her journeys, and so I think of her as far as Voodoo, how they would have, in that belief system, honored her and the travels that she made. And some of the three other smaller pieces, one that are here, you'll see symbols from Islam, Christianity, and other religions, Catholicism, because I wanted to speak to the universality of her spirituality for community. See, the thought of religion and the old African religions, they were based on not so much a deity, but the idea that we are all a part of each other. We are community. Each of us affects one another. So religion isn't this Sunday practice, it's this day-to-day practice of spirituality. And that's how I see her, that the spirituality of Harriet Tubman goes beyond the AME Zion Church and her belief in God, but it was her belief in community and responsibility, one human being to another human being. And so that is what some of my pieces speak to, and just placing her in different religions. I think one of the pieces talks about, I think the narrative is about how I think of her, like when I was in Ghana and thinking about her and who she would have been if that boat never stole her. I think of her like I see so many girls there with their mothers sitting under a tree in the coolness and the heat of the day. Her mother braiding her hair and maybe an auntie on the other side. And her praying and her mind speaking to the God of her religion there. Because certainly the Bible and the gun came hand in hand to Africa. And I think we use it almost like as a saying, the Bible and the gun, the Bible. But when you look at what it really is this forcing of Christianity on people that may not have been Christian. Christianity was in Africa. But this forcing of a religion as a way of justifying you doing a horrible thing to other human beings. One of the slave ships' diaries that I've made like a book for the Gage Center. When you read through some of the diaries, talks about how this slave ship captain did not want to use the hammer. He was advised by his sailors to cut off a couple of the enslaved people's arms and legs and to throw them in the sea, and that'll keep all of them in check. And he says that he's not going to do this. He just can't do it. And beyond them not being Christians, that they were still human beings. So many people that enslaved others use the idea, well, they're heathens. They're not Christians. They're not like me. Or I'm justifying enslaving you to shove Christianity down your throat and to save you. So then that makes me a rescuer and not this horrible person enslaving you. So I think of her, so some of the pieces I was thinking of her in that content of who she would have been in that lineage of family without the kidnapping having occurred with her grandmother. What God would she have prayed to? And what would have that voice have been, that voice of God, compared to the voice of God that she believed in and loved and that guided her, but that came out of a horrible institution. So that's some of my feeling of who she is. The piece that's on the end here that you can see there, I wanted to, we're looking at the idea of these 7 pillars of faith standing strong around Harriet Tubman and her rising in the middle of that kind of belief system of God, of Christianity. And that was a powerful thing for her. And how that Christian belief system, even coming out of horror, but sustained her and helped her through life. My band, Matima Say, is doing a performance on the 25th of this month at the Carriage House of the Cayuga Museum. And it is a collection of poems about Harriet Tubman called They Shall Run. And we're singing the poems. One of the pieces, they use Twi from Ghana. Oh, say tutu means to be free. So let's say Tutu was really a deity in their religion, a warrior in their religion. And so it speaks about the time when she had her blackouts. And so in my interpretation and my work during those blackouts is when she connected with God, that voice of God. That then out of those blackouts came her guidance for the work that she did. We know that she had the blackouts because she was hit in the head with an iron piece of metal, trying to intercede for another enslaved person who was going to be beaten, I believe, by their owner. But even that in her life provided this connection for her with God. Oh, say to. So that is, just to give you some of the philosophies of why I did some of the pieces, there's a piece with the nails in it. I am fascinated by African, what people call fetishes, but African statuary with the nails and the sharp things in it and all that, and bundles tied to them. So I do a lot of bundling. In my bundles and work that I do, there is actually dirt from Ghana and from the African diaspora mixed with U.S. dirt. And to me, that's a way of empowering the meaning of my pieces. That's my own belief system. Like with the African fetishes, with the nails and stuff and the bundles, they are put there and placed and nailed into them to then empower that statue to intervene for the people of that village or in that belief system. So I feel the same way about my work when I nailed into her feet. It's about empowering the work to tell the tales that are there and to kind of pass that lineage and standing of empowerment along in my work. So empowering her feet, that the simplest parts of our body performed the most amazing task. It was her feet that led people over and over again out of enslavement. And we hear when I grew up, you heard Harriet Tubman, 17 tribes, rescued, whatever number of people. So simplified. But when you hear about the actual rescues, like in Albany, when there were posters with her face drawn on it, they were looking for her, a high price on them. And there was an enslaved person who made it to Albany, New York, actually to Troy, New York. And he told someone that he was working with that he was looking for his family. He was trying to find his family, and he had heard they were in the Albany area. And that friend, co-worker, turned him in for his reward money. Turned him in. And Harriet Tubman happened to be in the Albany area for visiting, I believe it was visiting family in the area. And she heard about this enslaved person who was arrested and it was going to be returned to slavery because a co-worker turned him in for the reward money. And of course, she was not going to just walk by this. And she decided to intervene. And she and other abolitionists in the area gathered outside the jail where he was being held. It was up on a second floor. And word had it that she was able to get to behind the jail where his cell was, and to let him know that they were going to rescue him. Be ready. So when the federal marshals brought him downstairs out to go to a hearing, because you didn't have rights to legal representation if you were enslaved and you were caught. But there would be a hearing. All the master had to do was to have paperwork and prove you were his. There was no argument going on. This is my property. I'm taking it back. That all these people had gathered with Harriet Tubman rushing forward, she and another man, and grabbing him from the marshals, her doing physical battle with the marshals, her clothes being ripped. And they get this man away into the crowd and they push him towards this river. And they get him in a boat across the river. But the marshals are in pursuit. And they have messaged with a faster traveler, a boat or something, the marshals on the other side. And they meet and recapture the guy. Did Harriet and the abolitionists give up? No. They again gather where he is being held. And a man in a building across from the crowd yells, he offers so much money if they freed him. If they freed him, I'll give you money for freeing him. And so then there was a scenario of a physical battle being held, Harriet Tubman right in the middle of it, and getting this guy again, someone offering a carriage to her, and she gets him onto this carriage, and they drive him out of town. Two physical battles that she was in fighting. So when you start hearing her bravery, her audacity to fight for a freedom in that way for herself and for others, it is incredible. She rescued over 300 enslaved people during the Civil War, the only woman to lead a campaign in the war, and to take off a plantation or near a plantation where the enslaved and others around had run to, and to get 300 people on this ship from the north and the U.S. side, the Union Army, and to help get them to freedom. Stories of her getting a niece out of slavery at the auction block. And they're snatching her off the auction block and passing the girl around to other family members that were free and neighbors and people she knew. I believe it happened in Baltimore. And rescuing her own niece from enslavement. The woman was bad. And that voice of God that sustained her through this, that just held her up and made her believe and know that she was in a righteous cause, and that God would be there for her and give her success. That's what my show is about, and the voice of God, Harriet Tubman. The other piece I really love is, to me, is like an altarpiece to me. It's at the Cayuga Museum, and it has like this, you know, we always think of Harriet Tubman as the old woman that we have always seen in photos and stuff. But when she did this, she was in her 20s, in late 20s and early 30s. When she was doing these rescues and this work on the Underground Railroad, she was young. And I think now the Smithsonian has released a newly found picture of her as a young woman. The third fiber art piece I ever made, it's called The Middle Passage, and it's with the bodies of Africans laid out in that traditional picture, and with huge waves just engulfing them. And I wanted people to feel from that the enormity of what it must have been like, first of all, on a ship and traveling across the ocean after being forcibly marched from inland to coast of countries like Ghana, and then being held for months sometimes in those slave forts. And then sometimes the ships would go down the coast gathering more people to fill them, and then the passage over. And the incredible power of my people to have survived that passage. So that piece I pulled out and put over there. I thought it was very appropriate to Harriet Tubman and to the idea of the voice of God. To understand what Harriet did and who she rescued, you have to look at some of these enslaved people's narratives. She put the candy here, and I didn't touch it. She knew I would see it. See, it was my job every morning to go and get the slop jar off of that table and take it outside and throw it away. And she put the candy right next to it on the table. But I didn't touch it. See, I was always hungry. I didn't have no daddy in the field who would sneak me eats like the other children that worked in the big house. So I was always hungry. And see, the missus, she'd throw food on the floor in the hall where my mat was for me to eat off the floor like a dog. And when I went in there that first morning, I saw that candy, I wanted to eat it. She knew it. But I didn't touch it. But one morning, I was so hungry. When I went in the room, I grabbed that candy and I just shoved it in my mouth. I chewed it and I ate it real fast. And later that day, she called me. Henrietta, come here. Yes, mistress. Did you eat that candy off the table? No, mistress, I ain't seen no candy. You saw that candy. You ate that candy. No, I didn't eat that candy. You're lying, girl. And she went over to the fireplace and took down her switch. And she grabbed my arm. I was maybe 7, 8 years old, I think. And she started whooping me. But I was dancing and moving around. She couldn't get no good licks in. And she was getting madder and madder and redder and redder. And she called her daughter to come and hold me while she whipped me. But I was still dancing. And she was whipping, and she was hitting her daughter more than she was hitting me. And she was getting madder and madder. So she went and pulled the rocking chair over and grabbed me by my feet and threw me on the floor and took the rocking chair and put it on my head. And then she sat on it. And then she whooped me. When I come to, I was laying on my pallet in the hall floor. And this man, he was pulling at my mouth. this doctor. See, when she put the rocking chair on my head, it crushed in the side of my face. And I couldn't open my jaw. And he was prying. He came day after day prying, trying to get it to work. And I ain't ate no solid food since that day. And now I got this face, see? This face that children laugh at when they see, and babies cry when they see, and they run away. When I'm cleaning in the house, I see the mistress staring at me, and she look away when I look up. Because I don't think she liked this face she done made. And soon she sell me away. Slave narrative taken down in the 1930s. There were about 100,000 formerly enslaved people still alive in the 1930s. And so when we had that depression and they were hiring all those alphabet agencies, sent writers down to the South to gather these stories before all of these former enslaved people died. That is who Harriet Tubman rescued. That is what she rescued people from. And then you understand how compelling the voice of God must have been for Harriet Tubman to release people from that kind of misery. When my baby was born and he was placed in my arms and he was still mine for just a moment and not the master's, I promised him he was going to be free. And so me and William, we run off the plantation, made it up to the city called Philadelphia. We were helped by them religious folks, them Quakers. Found us a home, William a job. And I would sit at night and I rock my son. And I tell him all the possibilities for his life, how up here in the north in Freedom Land, he could be a blacksmith. He could own his own little store. How there were black doctors up here, black doctors. That he wasn't going to be somebody's slave like me and William were. And life was good in Philadelphia until that year 1850, where the law said that you and you and you and you and you, black, white, northern, southerner, had to turn us in if you knew where we were. And me and William, we knew there was nowhere for our son to be free, not in this country. And so we run again. We make it to this place called New York City. And the people, the freedom fighters, they get us on a train going north to this place called Albany. And then once in Albany, we are put on the Erie Canal. And we head west. And that's when trouble begun too. The white man on the boat, the one that owned the boat, they say, our master knows where we are. He's riding down the canal in a slow, fast-moving horse, and he's going to catch that slow-moving boat. And how they going to follow the law and turn us in. And William, he go over to our satchel, he take out a dagger, and he stand there all night at the bottom of the stairs. He protect me and the baby. He protect us. The men drinking and laughing and threatening us. And I tell my son, they're not going to get you, baby. Mama ain't going to let them get you. In the morning, they tell us that the master has ridden past the boat. He's going to meet us in this city called Syracuse. And how they were going to help hand us over to him. Me and William, we just look at each other. We don't have to say no words. And William, he'd go back to that satchel. And he'd take out a straight razor. And he'd walk up the stairs past them laughing, cussing men. And he'd stand at the edge of the boat. And he cut his own throat. And I walk up the stairs behind him. And I stand at the edge of the boat. And I throw me and my baby in the water. We all gonna be free. But when I wake up, I'm in the boat, I'm on the floor of the boat. They wouldn't let me die. And William, he hadn't cut in the right place. He hadn't cut deep enough. And they get him to a doctor in Syracuse and they sew him up. And that boat head right on down the canal. Like none of this happened. See, they were lying to us. Our master didn't know where we was. He wasn't chasing that boat. And the freedom fighters in Syracuse, they get us to Kingston and to Toronto, Canada. And we finally free. But my baby, he don't make it out of the water. My baby don't make it to freedom with us. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. The story of Catherine and William Harris, 1850, right after the fugitive slave laws.